Question answered. So let's take a look. We're going to go all the way to Singapore. And there's James in Singapore. And he says, when faced with a problem, how do I know if I should get help from others or keep trying to do things on my own? Okay, great question, James. James in Singapore. So you're facing a problem, and how do I know? Like, for instance, we looked at the situation as like, when you're young and when you're growing, you have ignorance, and also when you're independent and fully mature, right? Now, the thing is, in life, we're not going to be fully mature in everything that we do. Like, for instance, if you think about it, if you get an internship and it's your first day on the job, then for that job, you're like a child in the job because you know nothing about it, which means you do need help from other people, right? So even like my example is when you're at your first job, first day, you're going to be asking people for help all the time. They're going to be like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And they'll say to you, turn on the computer. It's like, oh, thank you, right? But, and then later on, as you start to grow more and more, you start to do things on your own and you start to make mistakes, right? In your job, you start making mistakes like, oh, darn it, I did this. Oh, shoot. And you learn, someone comes and helps you out. They're like, oh, and you're like, oh, that's what I did wrong. And you start learning from the mistakes. And then later, you become very proficient in your job. And in those cases, you're able to troubleshoot and hack everything and start helping others in that way too, right? So for James, you kind of have to look at yourself at what stage you are in what you're doing. It doesn't just mean that because you're 40 years old, 50 years old, you're good at everything. No, there's a lot of things you become like a child at because it's your first time doing it. So you have to kind of discern those things really well to see what stage you're at in those things. Cool? All right, let's move on to the next one. Next one says, it's from Pei Wen from KL. Why do we need to wrestle to get blessings from God? Can't God just give the blessings to us? That is a good question because, don't you think like, hey, if you love someone, like if someone loves you, isn't it better to just give? But let me give you an example of just kind of in real life, if you just give things to people if they don't deserve it, right? Like for instance, what happens to a child if the parents give them everything they want? Like everything they want. There's no effort put in. They don't learn the value of the things they have, but they just get everything they want. Then we know that these children turn into spoiled brats. Why? Because they don't understand the value of what they're getting. Because everything just comes to them so freely and so easily, right? One of the things you have to understand is God, because He's created us, He knows what human beings are like. And one of the things we have to understand is, God wants us to. Why does He want us to struggle and struggle and wrestle for these things? Is because we need to know the value. Because one of the things I know for sure is, if you give something to someone who doesn't value it, they just mistreat it and they throw it away. Then how do you feel as the one giving it to them, that you gave them something valuable and they just throw it aside? What would you think? You'd be thinking, there's no way I'm going to give this to them anymore, right? And in the same way too, God understands human beings more than we understand ourselves. And we have to realize, now, one of the things is God's teaching us value. We should value it. And things should, if you think about it in this way, if God is really, really fair, then people should get things when they deserve it. Because that's fair. That's fair, right? So I hope that answers the question, Pei Wen from KL. Let's go over to Chloe. Chloe in PJ. Why do I always feel like running away from my problems? Okay, so this is a question that a lot of people are probably feeling like this. Why? Well, why do people like to run away from problems? Because it's easy, right? If you think about it carefully, in the very, very short term, running away from your problems is the easiest thing to do. One thing human beings really, really hate is getting into problems. Like, for instance, don't you hate it like when you get into an argument with someone and then you guys go home and then you have to say sorry and then you're like, kind of like, oh, should I call them? Oh, no, they should call me. No, I should call them. Oh, no, and we kind of sit there just wondering, should I call, should I not call, should I call, right? People don't, it's hard. Going through struggles is hard. However, the thing you have to understand is we avoid it because it feels like it's going to be so hard. However, long term, it is far better to resolve it now than later. Because the one thing I tell you for sure is this: the longer you wait, the bigger it gets. Haven't you ever had this before? You get into a fight with your friend, and then if you don't resolve it right away, you know what happens? The thing that happens is the longer you wait, the more you talk to other people, and the more angry you get, and the more angry you get, the bigger the problem gets, and the bigger the problem gets, the more you don't want to talk to that person. It even gets to the point where you don't even want to be in the same area as them. That when your friends hang out, it's like, hey, what's going on tonight? Oh, you're gonna come tonight? Is Chloe coming? Yeah, she is. Oh no, I'm not gonna go out. That's what happens. When the faster you resolve it, the smaller the problem is gonna be, the smaller it is. Right? When it's just like your fight is like, you know what? I'm so stupid. I love you because you're like my best friend. Oh my gosh, you're my best friend too. And they start like loving each other even more. It's better to do it faster. But yeah, it's true because people don't like to go through hard things. And that's why it's easier to run away. All right, let's go over to Aya. Aya. Oh, in Japan. Aya in Japan. What is it like to have mature faith? Okay. Now, mature faith, what does it mean? Well, one of the things that we saw in the story of Jacob was he is able to resolve things on their own. Like, remember, when you become more mature, you become more independent. And it doesn't mean that you can never ask people for help. But being independent or being mature means that number one is that you can handle yourself in these situations regardless of how it goes. And secondly, you can discern situations really well so that you know when to ask or when to do it on your own. Right? You know when it's your own problem and something you need to resolve. Like for instance, if you're a kid, how do you deal with breaking something in a store and you have to pay for it? You're like, Mom, help me, right? Because you broke something, so you get your mom to pay for it. But when you are mature and you grow up, you take care of it yourself. Like, no, I got it. No, I'll take care of it. Right? When you grow up, are you going to ask your mom to buy you a house? When you grow up, you're going to ask your dad to buy you a car? No. These are times where you do it on your own. You become mature and independent, also when it comes to faith. When you're young, someone is always feeding you. They're always the one asking you the questions to make you think deeper. They're always the one trying to bring you closer to God. But in faith, when you're becoming mature in faith, you're someone that even when you're by yourself, even when there's no one around, you can pray. Even when there's no one around, you can study the words deeply. Even when there's no one around, you can think about it much more clearly and draw closer to God, even if there's no one there, right? So the best way to do it, Aya, is to think about it in terms of physical too. Oh, physically mature people are like this. In the same way, mature people in faith should be like this. Great question, Aya from Japan. Let's move on to Jean. Jean in KL. Jean in KL asks, if I didn't ask for help and just keep it to myself, how can I get peace of mind? Well, that's a little bit, it really depends on what the problem is. Because if it's something that requires help, then you're not going to get peace of mind because it's going to be impossible to resolve. You know what I mean? Like an example I would give you is like if you have some problem with the courts, with the law, you need a lawyer because the lawyer knows the law. But if you do it by yourself, you're gonna mess yourself up, right? And you're never gonna get peace of mind, which means that you need to understand, first discern is, do I need help or do I not need help, right? Do I need it or not? Because some things do need help. Like I said before, is other parts of your life, you may, even if you're like 30, 40 years old, it doesn't mean you're mature in every aspect of life. Some parts you might not be as mature as you thought you would be in that area, which means you do need to get help, right? And to get peace of mind, it really depends. Is it something that needs someone else? Or this could be something that could be another topic for the bubble talks in the future is sometimes we can't forgive ourselves for certain things. And that's why you'll never get peace of mind, is because we don't forgive ourselves, or we feel guilty about something, even if it's resolved. But Jean, I would have to know a little bit more about what the actual situation was. Okay, let's move to HL in JB, in Malay, in Johor Bahru, JB. Okay, HL. Okay, when problems come, I will sometimes just try to avoid them, but that isn't the right way to curb the problem. How should I do when facing problems? I would say that one of the things that causes more problems is if you face the problem too quickly, as in you're still in an emotional state. And that does cause more problems, because if you're having some problem with someone, but you're still in an emotional state, most of the times people in an emotional state do not handle problems very well, like really terribly, like terribly. right? Which means that you'd have to sit down, look at the problem, and understand how you're going to have to deal with it and resolve it. And then the hardest part, I believe, is the actual contact, like saying, hey, can we talk? Hey, can we talk about this? I'm going to say that's one of the hardest things to do. And in the beginning, if it's a very difficult thing for you to contact that person, honestly, this is for another talk too, but it's sometimes good to have someone else, a third mediator, to kind of bring, to talk to the person and say, hey, this person wants to talk to you, and you can have someone to mediate the situation, someone you trust, someone that both sides trust, right? So, yeah, like everyone wants to resolve it. The hardest part is, it's just that first step of calling them, or first step of saying, hey, let's talk. That is the hardest part, because you know that the moment you say that, you get really tense and nervous. You're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But that is the most maturest and the best way to do it. But if you can't, this is not a bad thing either. It's good to find a third person or a mediator that can help you out with it. And I definitely recommend it. It's better to do it that way than not solving it at all. Okay? Thanks, HL. That's a really good question. I think it's the last question today from Jason. I'm not sure if it's Jason 1 or Jason 2. It's one of the Jasons, right? So it says, I realize that after having faith, it seems like there are more problems. Is that normal, and how can I counter it? And the answer is yes. All right, we're done. No, I'm just kidding. You're a terrible pastor, right? But it's true. In the beginning, there'll be more problems. And I'll give an example, like I talked about work, right? When you start going to work for the first time, all there is are problems. What do I do first? What do I do second? I don't know. Oh no, something's happening. What do I do? What do I do? And because you're starting something new, in the beginning, it's just problems. I'm serious. It's just problems. You're like, oh, I just came to faith. It's supposed to be better, but all I get is problems, right? And the answer is, in whatever you do in life, whenever you first start it, there's going to be problems first before anything else. But as you grow and as you mature, and finally when you become independent, what happens is, it becomes something you're very, very good at. So Jason, if you look at your job or even at school or studying, if you're working, think about it. In the beginning, it's all problems. I don't know what to do. Oh, I'm nervous. What should I do? Oh no, something went wrong with the computer. What should I do next? Oh, the customer said this. Oh, what should I say next to them, right? But later on, when you have all the experience, what happens? You know exactly what to say. Exactly what to say, right? And you're so good and you're so proficient by that time that other people are asking you for help, which means that you're no longer having all these problems. But just like everything in life, in the beginning, tons of problems happen all the time. Jason 1, cool, Jason 1, right? Tons of problems are going to happen in the beginning, but just know that as you get better and better at it, then faith gets better, you get more blessings, and you understand it much more, and it's something that is much more fulfilling and satisfying as you get better. It's like work. When you first work, like I said before, the most satisfying part of work in the beginning is your paycheck, right? Oh, so hard. Oh, thank God for the paycheck. But later on, the satisfying part is when you are able to do things on your own and even help others, right? So, yeah, I understand. It's going to be hard in the beginning when you just start having faith, but it's okay. It's a normal thing, and you're going to go through the stages of the child growing and then maturity, just like Jacob did. And by the end of it, you'll be able to handle the problem.